What an awesome day to be together. This has been a cool day already. The rest of the experience, just praying that God would do his thing like he always does every week. And I kind of had it scheduled in to say some things and pray in a few minutes to kind of really get into today's talk. But I just feel like the need just to start with a prayer. So can we just bow our heads together for just a second? God, man, it's just been so cool today just to experience your presence as we sang about. So excited for what you did. First gathering, praying for your Spirit to just move in your own unique way this experience. Speak through me somehow. God, just take these words that are on a page and move in our heart. Do like a very internal thing through your Spirit. In Jesus' name, amen. So I'm going to start today's talk in a way that I don't think I've ever started a talk before at Revolution. And we've been doing this Revolution thing over 7 years now. Can you believe that? And so I don't know how many talks I've given, definitely over 300, which is crazy to think about. And I don't think I've ever done this. I want to take a selfie on Sunday morning with you. And maybe if you saw on social media, I already posted the first service selfie. So I'll give you a few seconds if you want to apply a fresh coat of lipstick or run a brush through your hair. Nick Ryan, if you want to get ready for this, go ahead. So we're and I'm going to post this. I'm going to put it on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Feel free to tag yourself, untag yourself if you like. Like that's just I can see, or whatever you want to do. Photoshop it if you'd like. But so here we go. So we ready for this? First ever selfie, Sunday morning, second service. What? That's not the right. Hold on. I'm not real good at this. There it is. Okay, here we go. We ready for this? All right, here we go. I'm gonna give a three count. 1, 2, 3. I'm gonna do one more. The first service is blurry, so let me just make sure here. Thanks, Nick. I guess you're wearing that. Okay, whatever. Oh, we'll go with it. We're going to go with it. You know what my biggest problem is as a follower of Jesus? The guy in the front of this image right here. And the fact that sometimes I have this idea that runs through my mind that I can do this like walk with Jesus thing on my own and I don't need anybody in the background of this image to support me or challenge me. I can do life by myself. And this whole concept, it's called American individualism. It's one of the American values, actually, and it's led to freedom and liberty for individuals. But I think especially over the last few decades, this whole value in America, it's gone to like hyper speed. It's a little out of control. The newest expression of it's probably the selfie. But there's stats within the church that kind of are contributed to from this value. And one of them is the Barna Group is a Christian research group. They released a study a few years ago that found that while Christianity it still dominates America as far as a belief system, 81% of people in this survey still self-identified as Christian. By the way, this is the kids partying over here in this room if you're new this morning. Let's just give it up for Revolution Kids. They'll be singing loud for a few more minutes. But so 81% self-identified as Christian. 21% of those polled believe that spiritual maturity did not require a vital connection to a faith community. Well, let's just throw it on the screen so we can get it here. 81% of the people in the survey self-identified as Christian. Only 21% believed that spiritual maturity required a vital connection to a faith community. George Barna, he says, much of what we call Christian is rooted in an individualistic approach to faith. And really, this is just a Western problem, okay? And this has not been around very long even. This whole, like we even use language that's kind of a reflection of this. We say things like, it's all about my personal relationship with Jesus, which is a phrase that you don't see anywhere in Scripture, and really it's only been around for the last few decades. And today, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about abandoning this whole Western cultural idea of individualism and truly embracing the biblical idea of family and what that looks like. And the third saying of the cross is really going to help us with that today. So if you haven't been here for this series, we're in the third week of 7 sayings of the cross, where we've been looking at these statements, these sayings Jesus made on the cross. And it's been an incredible series so far. It was written down in the Gospels that Jesus said 7 different sayings in those 6 or so hours of crucifixion. And in week 1, we looked at Luke's account, Luke 23:34. Jesus says on the cross, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they're doing." And we talked about the relentless, radical, rapid forgiveness of Jesus. And one of the statements that was kind of a big idea in that first week, we said, the cross has affected us deeply when we've learned to forgive quickly. That rapid forgiveness and how quick Jesus was with it. And then last week, we looked at the scene on the cross of Jesus, crucified in the center, the criminals next to him, and the conversation, the short conversation that happened on the cross, and how Jesus, when looking at one of the thieves or criminals, he said that in Luke 23:43, "Today you will be with me in paradise." To this guy that had just made some confessions, he lived his life for himself, and he says kind of at the end of his life, "Lord, remember me when you come into your kingdom." And we just simply asked the question last Sunday, which criminal are you going to be? And we talked about that, how we're all criminals, and we need the ridiculous, unfair grace of Jesus, and kind of what that looks like. And we're just going to move through that next part. And we're just going to move right into today. So we've looked at the Gospel of Luke the last 2 weeks. Again, Luke was not an eyewitness of the crucifixion. He interviewed people that witnessed it, corroborated stories, wrote down his account based on interviews. Today we're going to look at an account from a guy that had a front row seat to the humiliating, excruciating pain of the cross. His name's John. And he's actually one of the characters that's going to be in the story that we're going to talk about in this part of the narrative of the crucifixion. And John's narrative is really unique because it's different than the other 3 Gospels in the fact that about half of John's Gospel is focused on the last 24 to 48 hours of Jesus' life. So we get way more information on kind of the last couple days. And we're going to go to John 19. This is where we're going to start. John 19, verse 16. We'll read probably 7 or 8 verses and get to the third saying. Here's how it starts. It says, "So the soldiers took charge of Jesus. Carrying his own cross, he went out to the place of the skull, which in Aramaic is called Golgotha. There they crucified him, and with him 2 others, one on each side and Jesus in the middle." There's the scene again. And we've read about this place called Golgotha or Calvary for 3 straight weeks now, and I haven't really talked about where it was exactly. Because honestly, we don't know exactly where it was. There's actually 2 sites that you can visit in Jerusalem that we think, hey, maybe it was here. And I had a little bit more I was going to share about that this morning. We just don't have time. We'll get to that in another week probably. But that we get a little bit more information on the possible site of the crucifixion in the next couple verses. It says, Pilate had a notice prepared and fastened to the cross. It read, "Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews." Many of the Jews read this sign, for the place where Jesus was crucified was near the city. And the sign was written in Aramaic, Latin, and Greek. So we know that Jesus was crucified somewhere along the outskirts of the city of Jerusalem. We know that, of course, because of what John kind of says here in the gospel, and also because it was illegal to do crucifixions within the city at this time. Now, things change later, and the church experiences persecution within the city of Jerusalem. But anyway, but at this time, Jesus was crucified on the outskirts of the city. Again, we might look into it a little bit more in another week. We're going to fast forward down to verse 25. It says, near the cross of Jesus stood his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. So you didn't want to yell for Mary, okay? Lots of Marys are around. You got Mary, Jesus' mother. You have Mary, the wife of Clopas. We don't really know much about her. And you have Mary Magdalene, a follower of Jesus. She shows up multiple times throughout the Gospels, some stories. And here's where the third saying of the cross was spoken. When Jesus saw his mother there, and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby, and that's John, the guy writing this down, he said to her, woman, here is your son. And to the disciple, here is your mother. And from that time on, this disciple, John, took her into his home. And first, let's talk about what everyone hearing this for the first time in the room is thinking right now. Jesus referred to his mom as woman? I mean, you don't refer to a female as woman. So I don't hear any reports of boyfriends, husbands, like later on today, like, get over here, woman. None of that, because Jesus said it, okay? This is a different culture, and most of you are like, don't worry, that will not happen today. So, but this is a different culture, and we've tried to kind of put ourselves in this scene as much as possible. It's a totally different culture. So this was not like calling your mom woman today. Do not do that. Again, don't do that. This was actually a word of respect and honor. It would be more accurately translated in the 21st century as madam. It was a term of respect. He's showing respect to his mother through this statement. Of course, he's not going to say Mary because multiple Marys there. He says, madam. So Jesus looks at his mom and says, madam, behold your son. And then he looks at John, the guy who's writing down the story, and says, son, behold your mother. And from this moment on, as the text says, Mary went to live in John's home. So what's going on here, right? I mean, this just seems like an odd thing to speak on the cross in your final moments. Woman, behold your son, behold your mother. So what's going on was, back in the first century, there's no retirement homes, okay? There's no Florida yet. We haven't discovered it yet. This is way before assisted living or nursing homes. There's no Social Security, no pension, no Medicare. And Mary, the mother of Jesus, we assume that she's a widow at this point. We assume, based on this scene and many other scenes and conversations throughout the Gospels, that Joseph, Mary's husband, the father of Jesus, is dead. He's passed. So Mary's a widow, and she's elderly. The only way she's going to survive is if one of her sons cares for her, takes care of her. And now Jesus is hours away from passing, and he's making provision for his mom. Now, here's what's really interesting, though, and here's why this statement is so significant. We could just read through this as we're reading about the crucifixion and miss it. This is such a significant statement because we know that Jesus had biological brothers. John wrote about it earlier in the gospel, almost all the way at the beginning. In chapter 2, verse 12, it says, after this, he, that's Jesus, went down to Capernaum with his mother and brothers and his disciples, and there they stayed for a few days. So Jesus had biological brothers. We think he had 4 of them. We think their names were James, Joseph, Jude, and Simon. And of course, Jesus was the oldest. He was born of a virgin. You're the oldest if that happens, okay? So, by the way, we have any oldest kids in the room, like firstborn kids? Raise your hand if you're firstborn. Okay, it's several of us. I'm a firstborn child. As far as ancestry and genealogy is concerned, we are the most like Jesus. So I would encourage you, tell your younger siblings that this week if you'd like. They need to hear the truth. Hey, I just want you to know I'm a little more like Jesus than you. Anyway, we got to speak truth to our siblings. But, okay, Jesus is the oldest, and again, we assume that Joseph, Jesus' dad, Mary's husband, has passed away. And Jesus, being the oldest, meant that he would take over the family business and that he was responsible for the care of his mom. And now, as Jesus, the oldest, is getting ready to pass, he's making sure his mom is going to be cared for after he's gone. All throughout the agony of the cross, if you've been here the last couple weeks, you've probably noticed this. All throughout the agony of the cross, Jesus is thinking about other people. Just imagine that. It would be hard to even like get a thought, let alone be contemplating, okay, what can I do for others on the cross? It's just incredible. But here's what's so important about this third saying. You would think that there's several choices that would trump John for taking care of Jesus' mom. At least 4. His biological brothers, right? But see, Jesus' brothers didn't believe in him yet. They weren't followers of Jesus yet. And I've said it multiple times at Revolution, you wouldn't have been either. Like, what would it take to believe that your oldest brother was the Son of God? It would take a miracle, like rising from the dead. It would take a resurrection, right? Which is exactly what happened. Jesus rose from the dead, and at least 2 of his brothers, James and Jude, became followers of their brother. If that's not proof of the divinity of Jesus, I mean, it's just crazy. And they actually wrote 2 books. They're in the Bible. So Jesus picked John. Don't miss this. Jesus picked John above his biological brothers to care for his mom because John was a follower of him. See, here's what's so important about this third saying of the cross. At the foot of the cross, Jesus is revolutionizing relationships. Jesus is saying that the follower of Jesus sitting next to you today is not just someone that shares your belief or maybe shares some of the same values that you have or follows after the same God, but the follower of Jesus sitting next to you is your mother, your father, your sister, your brother, your son, your daughter. At the foot of the cross, Jesus is revolutionizing relationships. He's creating a new understanding of family. And he'd actually started this process way before this. At the beginning of his ministry, there's this little scene that happens in the Gospel of Matthew, and we'll talk about Matthew in another week of this. But let me just show you real quick what happens. Matthew 12:46, it says, while Jesus was still talking to the crowd, his mother and brothers stood outside waiting to speak to him. Someone told him, hey, your mother and brothers are standing outside wanting to speak to you. Hey, Mary, Jude, James, they're wanting to run something by you. They're out here waiting. And Jesus is like, well, they're going to have to take a number because here's what he says. He replied to them, who is my mother and who are my brothers? Pointing to his disciples, he said, here are my mothers and my brothers. For whoever does the will of my Father in heaven is my mother, or my brother and sister and mother. Again, Jesus was creating a new understanding of family. He was saying that the cross should so revolutionize our life that the relationships we have among each other, with other Christ followers, should be the strongest relationships we have in this world. Other followers of Jesus are your brothers and sister and mother and father and sons and daughters. It's called the family of God. And for those of you new to church or new to faith, or maybe you're not even sure about following Jesus yet, I know what you're thinking. This is weird, right? I even thought that as a kid. Like, I grew up in a church where we used that language a lot, like brother, sister, all that kind of stuff. And there was even a part of the service where the praise band would play music, and you were encouraged to walk around the sanctuary and shake people's hands and be like, good to see you, Brother Jim, and hug, good to see you, Sister Karen. And you'd fist bump a few people because they were the weird aunt or uncle. You weren't sure about them. So, and as weird as that was, as I think as ineffective as that was to really build relationships, pretty generic, but it was true. It's true. Followers of Jesus, the church, is family. One of the biggest pictures of the church, when you get past Jesus, past resurrection and ascension, like one of the biggest pictures of the church in the New Testament is that the church is the family of God. Let me show you a place. It's Paul. He started a bunch of churches around the Mediterranean Sea, and he had an apprentice named Timothy he was handing off leadership to. He wrote a couple letters to this guy, and in the first letter he wrote to Timothy, this is what he says. 1 Timothy 3:15, he says, if I'm delayed, you will know how people ought to conduct themselves in God's household, which is the church of the living God, the pillar and foundation of the truth. And the Greek word behind household is the word oiko. You'll know how to conduct yourselves in God's oiko. And Oiko is actually where the yogurt company, they get their, have you seen the yogurt over at the dairy section? It means family. So every time you eat Greek yogurt, I want you to think about this. Like, Oiko means family. And it's even translated that way in another translation of the verse. It says, so if I'm delayed, you will know how everyone who belongs to God's family ought to behave. It's family. Here's what I'm getting at. Church is not something you go to. It's something you belong to. Being part of a church means we are part of God's eternal family. The church is not like family. The church is family. I'm going to say that again, and then I want us to say that together. The church is not like family. The church is family. Ready? The church is not like family. The church is family. It's not something you go to. It's something you belong to. And Jesus was really starting this revolution at the foot of the cross. And I want you to think about this. This was so big for me this week. This was so big as I kind of thought through this. And if you've missed everything else today, like you got to get this right here. This was so huge, so huge. There are only two ways to get into a family. There are two ways to get into a family. You can be born into a family, and you can be adopted into a family. Here's how much God wants us in His family. He does both for us. It's called being born again, and it's called being adopted into the family of God. And if you're not a follower of Jesus, maybe you've heard that language of like being born again. It means that your life is totally changed. You're like a brand new person. You're a new creation. It's like you're being reborn. And there's another illustration of kind of what that looks like in Ephesians chapter 1, verse 5. Not only are we born again into God's family, here's what it says. God decided in advance to, let's read this, adopt us into His own family. By bringing us to Himself through Jesus Christ. This is what He wanted to do, and it gave Him great pleasure. I love this verse. We were born into God's family and adopted into God's family. God's like when you give your life to me through Jesus Christ, you're in. You are so in that I'm like reborning you, that's not a word, and adopting you. Like you are in. You're being reborn and adopted into the family. And check this out. Like again, don't miss this. This is so big. In Roman law during the first century, New Testament times, you could actually disown a child that you birthed. Horrible, right? Which I've actually joked about this a little bit. I've got to be honest. We have 3 kids, and we've never had the best insurance in the world, and we had some really intense complications with our first pregnancy. It was a tubal pregnancy, and my wife almost passed away from this event, so she was at risk. So we had a C-section for our other 3 children, so we always left the hospital with a baby and about $3,000 to $4,000 in debt to the hospital. And we just paid off Bentley, our youngest. He's 4. We just paid him off last year. And before I sent the last check, I'm like, okay, babe, this is it. You sure you want him? Okay, I mean, because we're going to pay him off here. This is, and of course, I'm joking. I promise, I'm joking about it. I love Bentley. He's awesome. But they could literally do this in Rome. But listen to this. If you adopted a child, you were forbidden to ever disown that child. God says, not only are you born into my family, but I have adopted you into my family, and I will never disown you. That's our dad. That's who our dad is. And you can grieve dad just like we give grief to our earthly parents. Some of us more than others. I won't point you out. You know who you are. But and the relationship gets rocky, and we sometimes break off the relationship. But on God's side, on dad's side, on our parents' side, everybody knows you're still their child. In the same way, once you become a child in the family of God, you're in. You're born in, you're adopted in, you're part of the family. And not only do you have a father, you have a church family. The church is family. It's not something you go to, it's something you belong to. It's not like family. It is family. And the same guy that wrote a couple letters to this apprentice, Timothy, he actually wrote a lot of letters to churches that he started. One of them was in Rome. And I want to challenge our church with this statement that Paul writes down. Because I don't think this is just for the church of Rome a couple thousand years ago. This is the challenge I want to give us today. In Romans 12:10, it says, be devoted to each other like a loving family. And this is the challenge I want us to leave thinking about today. And I want to give us 3 things that being devoted to each other like a loving family looks like. 3 things, not because that's all it means, but because they're really important and we don't have a whole lot of time. So 3 things, okay? Number 1, And this is what I want us to leave remembering and really contemplating, thinking about. Number one, being devoted to each other as a loving family means we exist for the family, not for ourselves. See, as human beings, we tend to think that the family exists for me rather than I exist for the family. It's a really immature way to think. It's American individualism. It's what my kids think, right? Pastor Tim Keller, he makes this statement. I think it relates so much. He says, people see the church as a store where they go to get things they need rather than a family that they give themselves to. Instead of looking to the church as people we give ourselves to community with, like to family, we look to it to get the services we want. Being devoted to each other as a family, it means we exist for the family, not for ourselves. And this is something I'm trying to instill in my kids. You're probably trying to instill this in your kids, and it's an uphill battle. But I'm trying to get my kids to understand that, look, the family doesn't exist for you. You exist for the family. And one of the ways we're trying to do this, one of the ways we're working on this is, I don't just have our kids clean up their own room, because that's kind of about them. I mean, it's with the boys, it starts smelling real bad, so that's about the family. But I also have them clean up like the common areas of the house too. I'm like, Jakin, and Jakin's our 10-year-old son. Jakin, hey, could you pick up the living room, pick all the stuff up off the floor? I'm gonna sweep them off the floor in a few minutes. Or Aspen, would you mind rinsing the dishes off and kind of getting them in the dishwasher ready to go? And I know at some point when I give these kinds of assignments, inevitably, I know I'm going to hear something like this. But Dad, all this stuff on the floor is not my stuff. But Dad, all those dishes, I didn't dirty all those dishes up. And I have to remind them over and over again, we're a family, and you're not picking up the living room for you. You're not doing the dishes for you. We're doing it for the family. Just like Mom and I, we do laundry. It's not just for us, it's for the family, okay? We do stuff for the family, not for us as individuals. See, this is what Sunday is about at Revolution Church. Like if anybody ever asks you, like, what's Sunday like there? What's Sunday about at Revolution? Here's what it's about. And I want you to write this down. Like everybody needs to have this ready to go if someone asks you what it's about. Sunday morning is a party where the family gets together and we're always expecting guests. That's what Sunday morning is. It's a party where the family gets together and we're always expecting guests. And if we're part of the family, that means we're chipping in on the party, that we're getting the party ready. We're blowing up the balloons and we're getting the decorations out and we're chipping in on the food and all that stuff. That's what the family does. That's what the family does. We're in our context, we're getting everything clean. We're part of the custodial team. We're working behind the scenes. We're getting the slides ready, stage design, folding the info cards, brewing coffee. We're getting stuff ready to go. We're greeting people as they come in with a smile, where they feel welcome as they're coming in. We're serving parents for one service so that they can come enjoy the party for one service, and then we'll come in and enjoy the party the next service. We're serving and ministering to kids so they can have their own party over here, which we heard them partying just a little bit ago. We're contributing together. We're giving of our resources together because we're a family. You with me on this? This is one of the things that just drives me crazy as a pastor, hearing things like this. Like when you go to someone and you're like, hey, we really need some volunteers in the nursery right now. We got a lot of babies at Revolution. We really need some volunteers in the nursery. And you hear a response like this, well, I don't really feel called to serve kids. I don't know what that has to do with anything. And I'm not trying to get on you. But it's different when you approach it as family. Like when we're a family, we just jump in where we're needed. Not that you can just jump in and serve kids. You got to apply and do a background check. But when we approach things as a family, we're like, yeah, I'll jump in. Yeah, I'll get on that team because I can see there's a need there. Because we're a family. And I want everyone to figure out their gift mix and their passions and their calling and kind of get in their niche. I'm not saying that. But when we see church as family, we jump in where we're needed. We're part of a family, so we're serving to make sure the party's the best party it can be every Sunday. See, I think most American churches are orphanages, not families. And this is not Revolution. I mean, this was very evident yesterday. We had so many people show up to this day where we're ripping up VCT tile and tearing down walls. It was awesome to see, by the way. Yeah, I wish we'd have got some video footage of that wall coming down. But anyway, I think most American churches are orphanages, not families. An orphanage is a place where you have a few overworked staff serving a bunch of underserved kids. All the work's dependent on a few individuals. And did you know that national statistics show that about 20% of church attendees, average church, 20% of church attendees do 80% of the serving? That's an orphanage. That's not a family. That's not what the church is to be. See, Sunday morning is a party where the family gets together and we're always expecting guests. If we're connected, if we're part of the family, then we're expecting guests. We're ready. Like we're hoping there's somebody new to meet today. Every Sunday. See, a healthy family doesn't put up walls to try to keep newcomers out. A healthy family welcomes newcomers into the family with big parties. With open arms and big parties. Some of the biggest parties we have in our families is when we're inviting new people in. Like weddings and baby showers. Man, we go all out for those big parties. That's what healthy families do. See, what some churches mean when they say we're like a family is we're small. And we want to stay small. So we feel this way. And churches get comfortable and exclusive and insulated. And they stay that way and eventually they die. It takes a long time usually, but that's what happens. That's not what healthy families are about. Healthy families don't put up walls to keep guests out. We invite new people in with open arms and big parties. And our focus as the family should be the guests that are coming in. Not us, the guests. That they're being welcomed and accepted and assimilated into the life of the church. That if we're already family, that every Sunday we're taking a risk and we see somebody, I don't think I know them yet, I don't think I've met them yet, and we're walking across the town and introducing ourselves to somebody new. Because we're family and I want to make sure they get assimilated into the family. We exist. If we're going to be a loving family devoted to each other, we exist for the family, not for ourselves. Number 2. Being devoted to one another as a loving family means we're involved in each other's lives. We have 4 pictures out in the front area of the town out there. And if you've been coming a few months, maybe you've seen these pictures. It says next steps above it. You're like, what does that mean? And this is what the pictures say right here. Foyer influence, living room connection, dining room community, kitchen, serving, and giving. What it means is every step at Revolution is about relationships. All the next steps that are taken are about relationships and becoming more a part of the family of the church. Let me explain it, okay? When you come in on a first Sunday, it's all about influence. You're in the foyer. You're probably just going to sit in a row and just check things out. You're being influenced by the message, by the music. You're kind of taking it all in. Not much relationship probably happens. Maybe you come in, you leave real quick, you get out real quick. You're a guest at Revolution. And we want people to feel like guests in the foyer. The problem is people come for years and they stay in the foyer. We don't want you to stay in the foyer. We want you to move into the living room. And that might be as simple as this, as saying, you know what, honey, instead of just coming to church and then sneaking out that back door and getting back, instead of that, you know what, let's hang out 10 to 15 minutes after service and see if we can meet somebody new. And yes, it's mostly on the family, but sometimes you got to take a risk as a guest if you've been coming a few weeks or a few months. Like, hang out, get to know somebody new. Maybe it's as simple as that. And those of us that are already connected, we're constantly looking for that. Maybe moving into the living room for you is just filling out that connection card. When you fill that connection card out and you mark something, you've moved into the living room because you're trying to get connected, right? And a staff member or a volunteer is going to call you this week. We're going to have a conversation, and we're going to try to build some relationship or get you with someone to build a relationship on a team, in a group, something like that. If you mark the connection card, you're moving into the living room. And we want people to build relationships in the living room where you feel like you have some friends. So we want you to go from foyer, you're coming, you're a guest, to moving into the living room. That's some on you, some on us, where you feel like you got some friendships at Revolution. You're moving into a new area of relationship within the family of the church. And eventually, we want everyone. This is the goal, not just for a certain exclusive group at Revolution. This is for everyone. We want everyone to move into the dining room. And the dining room is where you feel like family. So from guests to friends to family, this is life groups at Revolution. We're involved in each other's lives. And later on in Romans chapter 12, just a few verses after Paul says, be devoted to one another as a loving family, he says this: rejoice with those who rejoice, mourn with those who mourn. That's the big idea of life groups. We cry together, we laugh together, we celebrate together, we pray together. That's what life groups are about. It's not about how deep you can go in the Bible or it's about going deeper in relationship, and out of that, other things happen. And if you're not in a life group and haven't consistently been in a life group for at least a year, then it might not feel like family at Revolution. My guess is it probably doesn't feel like family, because we're a pretty good-sized church now. I'm asking, try a group. Try a group, and don't give up on connecting easily. It takes about 6 months for relationships to really start getting developed. And if you're not connecting after 6 months, try another group. And life group leaders, we got to be okay with, let our pride die. If someone's not connecting in our group, let them try another group. Different people connect with different people. It might not be anything you did wrong. We just want people to go from guest to friends to family, where we're involved in each other's lives. And then, of course, eventually also the kitchen, where we feel like we're on a team, where we're serving and giving together. So we got to be involved in each other's lives as family. Number 3, last one, I'll make it quick. Being devoted as a loving family means I don't give up on my family easily. I've seen it so much with Revolution. I've seen it with other churches I've served in. We give up on church too easily. People leave churches over the weirdest, dumbest things. She was talking bad about me, I'm leaving the church. Well, you can't just have a conversation and kind of talk. No, it's going to be much easier if I leave and find another church than if I have to confront that. Or Anthony said that on Sunday, I'm leaving. You're not going to at least send an email? No, I'm out. We give, and I'm not saying, there's reasons to leave community and leave churches when it's unhealthy and it's leading to some unhealthy things in you, especially when leadership's unhealthy. Maybe it's best to get out of that church. I've left churches before. But I'm just saying we give up on family too easily. And if we're going to be devoted as a loving family, we got to press through stuff. We got to confront stuff. We got to talk through things. Back to our dad that allowed us to be born again and adopted into the family, he never gives up. He never gives up on us, even in our worst moments. His love pursues us. It is relentless. It is reckless. And we're going to sing a song that kind of speaks of that love. And I'm just asking that God would open our hearts. If you need to take steps to moving more into the family of the church, I'm praying that this song challenges that. If you're not in the family yet, you haven't made that decision to follow Jesus, I am praying that this song moves you in that direction. Let's just stand together. Maybe you just listen in, but let's just listen into the words. I'd like us to just throw the words to the bridge on there. There's no shadow. You won't light up that part of the song if we could. So we get that background change. There we go. Just kind of read that to yourself. Then go to that next one. The next one right after. There you go. See, we believe, and we celebrate God every Sunday, that if you're not a follower of Jesus, or maybe if you have made that commitment, but it just hasn't been a priority, you've kind of walked away from it, or haven't been practicing it or living it out. We follow a God, we celebrate a God that has been pursuing you every day, and that somehow, I don't know, in His sovereignty and His grace, pursued you to get you in this room right now, in this experience. That's how much He loves you. He orchestrated life to get you here. I don't know what it took. I don't know if it was an invitation. You saw something on Facebook, or I don't know what, but you're here. And the relentless, reckless love of God has brought you here for a moment, right here. Man, if you have not given your life to Jesus, or maybe you've made that commitment, but it just hasn't stuck, you've kind of turned away from Dad for a little while, man, today can be a fresh start. It can be reborn, adopted into the family. And I just want to pray a prayer, and maybe you'll say something like this, or you just be real with God in this moment. If you want to take that step and follow Him, we're just going to be real together. God, I need you. I believe your love is real, so real that in a moment you gave your life away for me. And continually, day by day, by day by day, you give your life away for me. I believe Jesus is your Son. I give my life away to you. I don't deserve this. I've ran away from you. I've made a mess of things, God. But I'm just asking that in your grace you would make things new. Make things new right now. You got to pray for my friends taking this step. Just do what only you can do. Seal it. Confirm it in their hearts. Today's a big day. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. If you took that step today, I would encourage you, and hundreds of people over the years of Revolution have taken that step. I would really encourage you, identify it. Identify it. We've given you a connection card. We would just put your name on it. Mark, become a follower of Jesus. Mark it. I want to talk to you this week about this step. We want to help you kind of get more into the family of what's happened here at Revolution. And for those that are already family or thinking about being part of the family, as Brownie said, you have a great opportunity to show that we're family today. We need you. We need you to serve today. We need a bunch of people over at our building here. And what time is it? We need you to grab a sandwich, and in about 45 minutes, be over at the new space just down the road. We got 5 scrapers to get the floor scraped up. We got a lot of stuff to do, so we're hoping you'll be down there at 1 o'clock today. We need a big team of people. Also, if you're in a group, or if you're a group leader that's here, we would encourage you, especially this week, we're going to have a big event next Sunday night. If you didn't see it in your info card, next Sunday night is prayer and reveal night at the new space just down the road, 6:20 p.m. Don't want to miss it. We're going to reveal the drawings. Our construction team's going to be there. You're going to get to see kind of what this space is going to look like. We're going to have areas where you can see the drawings and stuff. It's going to be a night to pray, write names of people that you're praying for, write Bible verses in different places of the building. It's going to be an amazing night. Don't miss it. 6:20 next Sunday at the new space. We're getting ready for that this week. So if you're a group and you want to serve, there's going to be some information in the email that goes out to you to kind of get in the space this week and get it cleaned up. So other than that, love you guys. We'll see you for the 4th week of Seven Sayings. Don't forget your kids, okay? We're family, but we're not going to take care of them all day. Go get your kids. See you next week.